Movies. Everyone's watched at least one in their life, whether that's in a cinema or not, I could not care less. But the point is, you have seen at least one, and that's with good reason, because they are awesome and deserve your complete and utter attention as you immerse yourself in a world beyond our own to escape the day-to-day stresses and tragedies that you find around every single corner, especially in times of the global pandemic when there just seems like very little positive stuff to invest in the real world. So why not invest our time into something that can give us that ease and that happiness in a world beyond our own? Yes, I'm passionate about film, but I'm also passionate about Skylanders. So what would happen if we were to combine the two and create a film based on the critically acclaimed Skylanders franchise that has a dying fan base, unfortunately, or at least one that's not as huge as it used to be? Well, of course, I have compiled a list of how a Skylanders movie could fall on the quality spectrum. So naturally, this list is going to cover both ends of the spectrum as to why a Skylanders movie could potentially be terrible and why it could potentially be awesome. So yes, I cannot wait to talk about this and combine my two greatest passions in life right before you on film right here. You see, I'm even referencing back to film as I speak. But now we're going to roll the intro and get into the double top 10s without further ado, again on either end of the spectrum. Man, isn't this a spectacular angle right here? But regardless, as per the norm, we are going to in fact be starting off with the negative portion of the list, so that then we can end off this video on a high note with the positives that I have to talk about. And of course, kicking off the reasons why a Skylanders movie would be a terrible idea is because most likely it would do terribly commercially and critically as well, because critics go into video game adaptations with the predetermined mindset that it's gonna suck. And normally, when a critic goes into a film with that mindset, they try to tailor the entire experience to that mindset so they have the feeling of fulfillment and they just want to prove themselves right, in other words, so they go out of their way to criticize things that don't necessarily deserve criticism, and they're overly harsh with the movie, in other words. So yeah, for relationship and just for history of video game adaptations is not a very positive one, so that definitely wouldn't reflect well on the movie, because right out of the bat it would have a poor reputation before the first trailers even come out, because just the conceiving of a new video game adaptation is a big no-go for most critics. And if a film scores terrible reviews, then people aren't going to go see it, and then the film's not going to make money. So imagine that, our favourite franchise being turned into a film that is associated with nothing but failure. Why would we want a film if it's only destined to fail? That's number 10. 10 even, because apparently I can't count fingers and thumbs. But regardless, moving on to number 9, we have the fact that a Skylanders movie could cause people to turn on the franchise even more than they have already, because Skylanders is a pretty oversaturated franchise as is. We have mobile games, comic books, TV shows, video games, arcade cabinets, merchandise. Skylanders back in the day could be found everywhere, and revitalizing that could just give people a further distaste, especially if the movie isn't any good, which is the biggest fear about the concept of a Skylanders movie. Because if it's made, I want it to be made well, and I want it to be a good movie, of course. I want either a good movie or no movie at all. But yeah, a bad movie could just put a horrid distaste for the entirety of a franchise in people's mouths. Why would they want to play a video game they've never played before when they know that the movie based on said video game is awful? And even if it does do well, there are going to be people out there who don't like it, because that's just how opinions work, unfortunately. And their negative word of mouth even, and their influence could easily sway others into agreeing with their opinion under stress and peer pressure. Sometimes people crumble with their own beliefs when somebody else brings in their opinion about a topic, which I have only one thing to say to that. and that is maintain your own opinions. Don't change your opinions based on anybody else, okay? Your opinions are unique to you, and that's powerful. Hold on to that with everything you have, and don't feel influenced to change them whatsoever. My favourite Skylander might be Igniter, but I certainly don't expect everyone else to love him to the same capacity as I do. In fact, if anything, my love for him is unique to me, and I appreciate being one of the only SkyTubers who would put Igniter at my number 1 slot for my favourite Skylander. It comes as an honour to me. So yes, let that be known that opinions are a powerful thing, and they can definitely sway people's taste for a franchise because of this movie, and that could wind up being terrible for it. But coming in at number 8, it loops back to our theme of failure beforehand, because it's not an easy film to market. You know, you have all of these characters in this fantasy world that's set in the sky with numerous floating islands, you know. Besides, for fan base, for pre-made audience, there's not going to be much interest outside of that. On top of that, it's going to have competition, you know. It's going to have to compete against other big children's films, and parents aren't going to want to go and risk a film that has characters that they might not necessarily like, when they can instead see a Disney remake that, you know, has all of the classic songs and the classic characters that they grew up with, so they have that nostalgia behind it. You know, people have preferences, and being able to market towards that isn't easy for what could be a huge film based on how much this film could draw from. So naturally, not an easy film to market, and that simply sets up for failure, because if reviews don't sell tickets or harm the sales of tickets, then people not being interested in the trailers aren't going to help it neither. But moving on to number 7, we have the fact that it could be so poorly and lazily made to where the story and characters are beyond lackluster. They could make the characters one-dimensional and quite boring, lacking in chemistry. They are just simply exposition dumpers as they set up the world of Skylanders for a sequel or so on. You know, and as for the story itself, the special thing about it is that as a portal master, we are placing these Skylanders onto the portal and then interacting with their world. We're controlling them through our controllers and our television devices. But you can't have that same level of interactivity in a film. It's more of a passive experience, and that can't really be captured in a film, so they have to adjust the experience entirely, and that might not translate well to the story whatsoever, leading to it being lackluster and making the movie a terrible concept from the get-go. And that leads us quite nicely on to number 6. I was alluding to this before even, but number 6, it could be poorly written. And I hate that idea of the fact that they can just take something as wide and as expensive as Skylanders and just make something that's horribly written, especially since, you know, this could be so cheaply and quickly whipped together that they don't proofread, that they don't draft upon redraft to make the script as great as possible. It just feels as though they'd get the script to the point to where, hey, we can give some voice actors some lines now, let's get those celebrity voices in so we can put their names on the posters and then pump this thing out already. So yeah, the script could definitely come out unfinished and just poorly written, to say the least, because there's not really going to be much care put to a Skylanders movie. Let's be honest, it's a video game franchise, and one that not as many people care about nowadays as they used to. So I don't think Activision would put in that amount of care for a franchise that's not even their biggest one. And all of this could lead to poor writing. If only I could write the movie. If I was to write the movie myself, believe in me, I'd do much better than the professional writers. And of course, at number 5, we have the fact that there could be so much unnecessary shit in this movie. You know, there could be far too many characters, which again goes back to them being one-dimensional and all. You know, it could overwhelm the viewer with too many faces to remember, and it just means that all of the characters could be so lazily inserted in for the sake of fan service, taken away from memorability and harming the pacing of the movie overall. And say, because there are no distinctive characters, no characters with anything that goes against a generic template, then that can just come across as dull and poorly written. So again, loop back to previous points. Man, I'm loving this whole looping business, apparently. I don't think the film would love that, though. I have a feeling that the film wouldn't be able to tie its themes together. It most certainly wouldn't be able to tie its characters together, because, as I said before, there'd be so much unnecessary fodder, especially exposition, because a movie like Skylanders would need it. or at least one based off a franchise, would need it, considering that there's just so much to set up with a world of Skylanders. So, again, all of this unnecessary fodder could give people a distaste for films since it could be so poorly paced. And there could be sequel bait, which everybody hates. I'm pretty sure I've mentioned this already, but if I haven't, I mentioned it now, and that's what matters, because, oh boy, sequel bait is bad. It, again, leaves a distaste, especially if it happens at the very end of the movie, because that tends to be what you remember the entirety of the movie for. Like, sure, it can be a great movie leading up to it, but then when it has sequel bait, and you realise that this film wasn't meant to be its own separate entity, and it was simply just here to set up a future sequel that will hopefully make more money than this one, that just makes the whole experience feel lackluster and unnecessary. You know, this whole unnecessary feeling could be flustered throughout, making the Skylanders film once again terrible. I hate to say it. But, of course, there's the fact that Skylanders could also have a terrible art style. I'm not talking about the games here, I'm talking about if they were to make a film adaptation with realistic looking CG Skylanders in the real world. We all remember what Sonic looked like in those first trailers now, don't we? Imagine taking a iconic Skylander like Trigger Happy and giving him that realistic look with all the hair, for actual pistols, maybe a sheriff's hat, you know, a more realistic looking tongue, that but longer. Man, just thinking of it is grossing me out, man. I don't want my Skylanders to have a very betraying art style that looks disgusting and, again, discourages people from seeing the movie, because at the end of the day, films is a visual medium, and when your visuals are ugly, why would you want to go and see that over a pretty nice, colourful looking film? So yeah, the potential for a terrible art style is definitely there, and that could also betray our favourite characters, making that for number 4 reasons why Skylanders movie could suck. But moving on to number 3, we have the fact that the wrong people could be working on it. You know, imagine Activision bringing in a bunch of people who know absolutely nothing about the franchise, and so because of that, they're not effective at balancing between making a good movie and making a movie for the fans, you know. So the movie doesn't give us as fans anything to enjoy, and instead we can just watch it being like, sure, it was a good movie, but man, it was a terrible Skylanders movie. I'm so disappointed that they didn't give me something to enjoy, you know, something to enjoy as me, the main audience for this film, who will want to go see this film. They need the right people, aka Skylanders fans, so they know how these characters should be written, how the world should be built up. Basically me, hire me as the writer, director, producer, of course the editor, you know, for actors in it, I'll do for voiceover for every single character. But enough of this cockiness here. I couldn't make for the whole, for a one-man crew, so to say. But still, you need the right people working on a movie like this to achieve that fine balance of making an overall good film, as well as a film that can tailor itself towards the fans to give them something that they want as well, so that then they aren't distasteful towards the movie and spread around that hatred for it, as I said, the critics could do at my number 10 point. But number 2, we have the fact that this movie would not please everyone, especially when it comes to Skylanders fans who want their favourite Skylanders in a movie, because hey, maybe your favourite Skylander is someone obscure like Wrecking Ball. The chances are he's not going to be in the movie, and so people who have him as their favourite Skylander are really upset by the fact that they didn't see their favourite Skylander in the movie, and now they hate the movie and are spreading distaste for it and discouraging people to watch it. And then you have other people whose favourite Skylander is Drobot, and Drobot's left, right and centre in the script, so those Skylander fans are loving it. They're like, yes, the best character for the franchise is getting the representation he deserves. You know, he carries the film with his excellent character arc. It could create for a huge division just because there are so many characters to draw from and so many different Skylanders fans who connect to different characters for different reasons. And so naturally it's not going to please everyone. And I would hate for a Skylanders film to be created and for it to be as divisive as it potentially could be, with the fact that there's too many characters to introduce into a single movie, and that will therefore raise bad publicity as bad words start in circulation. But number 1, without a shadow of a doubt, is that Activision would milk this film for all it's worth. Yeah, they're not just going to make this film, no, they're going to merchandise it, they're going to, you know, create soundtracks for it. They aren't going to stop ramming this down our throat, and it's just going to make us sick and tired of seeing it everywhere, especially since that's just going to make us miss the games even more when we're seeing Skylanders stuff, but not the Skylanders stuff that we traditionally know and love. And worse yet, if there was to be a sequel, then once again the critics would go into it with a poor mindset, not only because maybe they didn't like the first one, but because the first one was rammed down their throats so much. I feel like potentially the Minions movie or the Frozen sequel could have done a lot better if it weren't for the fact that it was rammed down people's throats so much, due to, of course, their respective companies absolutely milking these franchises for what they're worth until they lose their charm and what made them so special to begin with. And that's exactly what Activision would do to a Skylanders movie. They would milk it for everything it's worth, and that's without a shadow of doubt nor a hint of sarcasm the number one reason why a Skylanders movie could potentially be awful. No, I'm joking. I was being sarcastic, because the true number one is the fact that it might not have Igniter in it. Any Skylanders media ever without Igniter in it is just doomed to failure. Yay, now we get to move on to talking about the positive stuff. Why a Skylanders movie would be so awesome, and man, this is where my true passion will showcase. You thought the video was long leading up to this point? Haha, you ain't seen nothing yet, because boy was I looking forward to talk about why a Skylanders movie could potentially work really well, and where that awesomeness could come into factor. And that kicks us off with the fact that number 10, memorable music is a given. The Skylanders soundtrack throughout all of the Lorne Bowles iterations are phenomenal pieces of art. That's what this music is. It goes beyond music. It's an art form with just how worldly it is. It truly feels like part of a world that Skylanders is set in, and on top of that, it has the upbeat pace to it. Is what makes interacting with the game so much fun, as you can listen to these extremely memorable, incredible tunes that are very well constructed to give this feeling of grandness and overall spark emotion and excitement. I can't emphasize enough that the Skylanders soundtrack is incredible. You're welcome for mentioning this here, Judas. But enough of the hashtags, you're welcome, Judas, because, you know, even if the film was to use that music that they have rights to already, so we just have more of the same, then I'm okay with that, because hearing this soundtrack in a big screen with surround sound, can you imagine how incredible that would be? But even better yet, we'd have potential to bring back Lorne Bowles, who could create even more original pieces of music for the film. And so naturally the film, right off the bat, has potential to have some incredible music, and that alone excites me. That idea, that concept. I want a Skylanders movie just so then I can hear its glorious music with speakers and surround sound. Do not deny me that pleasure. But moving on to number 9, we have the fact that Skylanders stories, in the centre of their cause, are rather basic. It's just an evildoer trying to spread darkness throughout Skylanders, and then the peacekeepers come in to, of course, defeat chaos and vanquish his darkness. And they could take this core story element, this basic idea, and expand upon it so heavily with a movie which has to be more story driven than a game, because a game what's more important in a game than the story is for gameplay, because that's what you're interacting with. That's what you buy a game for. You buy a game to have fun with the gameplay. The story and the characters, whilst important, are often not as crucial as gameplay elements, especially in a franchise like Skylanders, where there are so many characters, so you can't be as in-depth with the characters, so it's more important to make the gameplay incredible. But since there is no gameplay in a film, because it's a passive experience and you're not interacting with it in the way you do a video game, then that's what could allow a story to be expanded upon, because it would be the film's primary focus, and that's what would lead it to have such potential quality to it. But now, for number 8, we have the fact that there is so much content already to draw from. You know, we have those core elements, we have all of these characters, all these locations. So all they need to do is take those, draw from those, take their inspirations, their subtleties, and as I said earlier, expand upon them. This film should come easy to write. Not that it should be lazily done or poorly done, as I talked about with the reasons why it could be terrible, but it should be so easy to write it well all the same, just because they have so much material to work with already, and all they need to do is take that and adapt it effectively to a film-based script. Do what the Sonic movie did and start off small and slowly build up your elements so that then you have full investment in a small detail, and remember to slowly but surely incorporate things that for fans of a franchise can pick up upon and just sit there in their cinema seats with a massive smirk on their face as they see all of their favourite references come to life on a big screen. That's where the art and the experience of film comes in, and it could be so glorious if it's all brought and written together by the correct people working on the movie. Note how I said correct. If they get the right people, oh boy, are we in for an absolute banger of a time with this film. Again, this is not confirmed. This is just me going over a potential Skylanders movie and what could work and what could not. And right here, continuing with what could work, is the fact that with whatever characters we that wind up getting picked for the film, I'm sure they will be entertaining. Even if they're one-dimensional, they can have nice little quirks to differentiate them, give them nice chemistry, and just really allow for some entertaining gags and all. You know, we can have Drobot coming in with his intertextual awesomeness and just reminding us of Soundwave and giving us that kick of nostalgia. Don't expect many images in the editing here. You know, this is all about my passionate talk about 10 reasons why a Skylanders movie would be awesome and 10 reasons why it would be terrible. Moving back to why it would be awesome, for number 6, we have the fact there would most certainly be memorable action choreography. You know, we have all of these Skylanders with their distinctive personality traits and all to make the characters entertaining, but on top of the personality, they'd also have unique fight styles that could really complement each other very well. You know, you could have maybe two sword wielders like Thunderbolt and Crypt King going around striking their sword together, and you know, maybe even swapping their swords over halfway through the fight, a bit like how Thor and Captain America do it in Endgame. And either way, that could create some incredible grand scale action because Chaos utilizes armies of Dro. Like, remember that opening cinematic for Spyro's Adventure and all of the action from that? That's some of the best cinematography work and action choreography I've ever seen for a video game trailer, and we'd see this on a big screen in a film format, mind you. It could be so competently helmed, especially if we get an excellent action director in here for some dynamic camera movements and smooth edits, just ultimately really invest you in this grand scale action, and that alone could be really entertaining, especially to action fans like myself. But number 5, what could be so great about this potential Skylanders movie is that it would raise awareness for a franchise. We would have people going back to these old games, playing them to see, you know, about these bells and whistles and what they drew from to make the movies with. And ultimately, because Skylanders will be back in the public eye, we'll be more likely to get another game again, especially a game based on the film and, you know, heightening off that popularity, so to say. Maybe even it's released at the same time as the film, around that Christmas release window, if I can stop hiccuping, that is. So yes, for awareness that this film would raise for the franchise would be the best way to put it back in public eye, and would definitely start in raising it from its current dormancy and its state of unaliveness to keep this monetized. Not that my channel was monetized to begin with. CSV awareness, incredible potential there, and I'm repeating the word awareness just to emphasize my points right here. But speaking of emphasis, I want to put emphasis on number 4, to where if this film was animated, it could look visually stunning. I say animated here because a live action with ugly, realistic looking CG Skylanders, yeah, visually that would not be dazzling to say the least. But if this was, if this took the route of full blown animation, boy, it could look crisp, clean. And the thing with Activision is that they have a very good relationship with Blizzard, and Blizzard have an animation studio which have created incredible Overwatch shorts. So I have no doubt in my mind that they could bring in some incredible animators, since they are so cross-industry, and Activision have the power for this collaborative effort to bring in such great animators to have the film with such detail and stunning visuals, which leads quite well to our third point right here, the fact that this film could set records. It could be the first Oscar win for a film based on a video game that isn't Wreck-It Ralph, and even then Wreck-It Ralph only got nominated because animation isn't as much of a competitive area as what things like the best feature film of the year are, because there's fewer animated films, and there most certainly are fewer good quality animation films. Like, seriously, a film can there can be a year with about 16 animated films released, and only 2 or 3 of them will be decent enough for the Oscar. So the Skylanders movie could absolutely nail it and hit it out of the park. And because of that, its Oscar potential would be through the roof. And the idea of those records being set definitely would put a smile on Activision's face. They would strive for those records, and because of that, they want to make the movie as great as possible, which definitely gives it potential. And just think of that, as a Skylanders fan, getting to see an award-winning movie on the theatres before we even know it's award-winning, and the critics go into it all cynical, and they're surprised, and the film does phenomenally well because it subverts everyone's expectations and becomes an actual video game adaptation. That's a great movie, because I mentioned Sonic before as a reference to a good video game movie. Sure, it's good, but it's not great. We haven't had a single great video game film adaptation ever, and this film could be the first. You can't deny that potential, and Activision most certainly couldn't. So Activision, give us this, please. Not watching this. But that brings us to number 2, where the setting is great for the fantasy genre, because the fantasy genre is a huge one in cinema. Definitely a beloved one amongst kids. We've had a recent fantasy-based animation film recently known as Onward, so this film could definitely heighten off of that film's I don't want to say popularity, but definitely its quality, because whilst it's not the most popular film, it most certainly notoriously is a good film. So people could go into this one expecting that same amount of quality, and so long as they maintain it, they will be satisfied. And they can go into it with a list of expectations, and as long as those expectations are met, they are satisfied with the final product after having, it delivering what they were looking for. And I, for one, love the fantasy genre. I love dragons and mythological creatures and just fantasy worlds that take us out of our world, that give us something to immerse in and provide that ultimate escapism. And this film, providing all of that, is what gives it such huge potential. But my number one even has to be the fact that this film, if it was to be animated, could kickstart entire careers. Because I can't see, unless Activision wants celebrity names on the posters, them going after, big names in cinema. I can see them picking more fitting voices for people who are much less well known in the industry, or people who are only just coming into the industry. And this film, with its success, could get those names out there. And so from this film, not only would these actors have a soft spot for this film, for it being their big break, allowing them to truly propel to success later on in the industry, but also just the fact that we'd have such great talent debuted in this film. And if we were to get debuting actors, of course, actors in their debut films, especially when they're animated and doing voice acting even, they give it their all. They want their potential to grow, and they want people to see that there's so much potential there in those actors based on that first initial performance and how good it was, and that it only goes better from there. So that amount of effort that could be put into the acting, and the fact that it could kickstart these careers for incredible new actors moving forward, just gives the Skylanders movie such potential. And on top of it all, it's just so powerful to see a movie with debuting actors that allows their careers to move forward. It's just so heartwarming to see these actors' careers made by huge successes such as this one. It warms the old heart, so to say. So this movie could be heartwarming for that there reason. I love the idea of actors coming into the industry and being able to gain success and recognition through their efforts in a movie with such potential as this one. But that's going to do it for this here joint top 10 video. I hope you guys enjoyed both ends of the spectrum. I personally could definitely see the movie taking a terrible route, but let me know how wrong I am in the comment section below. And until the next top 10 arises, peace.